Hey, welcome back to Zombie Tactics. You know, I've had concealed carry on the brain lately, and the whole concept of carrying a gun around with you on your person at all times. You might want to refer to my previous video on the moral and ethical burdens of carrying a weapon on your person. I'm kind of going along that vein, but I'm making this another issue of stupid gun laws because I do want to talk about the stupidity of concealed carry laws in our country, the United States of America, and I specifically want to zero in on some things in California because that's where I live. You know, not too long ago, about 1985, I want to think, 85, 86, gun rights were really on the ropes in this country, and you would find yourself hard-pressed to be able to carry a gun on your person, concealed or not, even in places that you would not think, like I think Texas. It was darn near impossible at that time to get a concealed carry permit. It may have been impossible altogether. Strangely enough, at that time, it was actually easier in California, if I recall the laws at that time. But, I mean, you know, hardly any states, or certainly not a majority of states in the 1980s, at the time period that I'm thinking about, allowed you to have a concealed carry permit or permitted you to carry a weapon concealed in some other fashion. My, how things have changed. The vast majority of the states in the United States now allow some sort of concealed carry option, with the exception of, I think, Illinois, and there's somebody else I'm forgetting, I'm sure. So things have changed a lot. Now, you would think if the anti-gun crowd had it right, that there would just be blood in the streets and murder and mayhem and people killing each other over every little, parking accident, every little fender bender out there. But that hasn't happened. As a matter of fact, violent crime has gone down at a curve that almost seems to directly match the rate at which gun ownership has gone up. In the states that have the most liberal, and by liberal I mean allowing you, not a political persuasion, allowing you to have a gun and carry it on your person, those seem to be the ones where the crime rate is dropping faster. There are some specific examples that we can point to, Florida being a big one, where the minute you were able to own a weapon, crime went boom, and the minute you were able to carry a weapon, crime went boom. So the whole anti-gun crowd seems to have gotten it completely wrong, but they keep spouting these same ideas of like, oh, if you allow people to have guns, they're going to all kill each other. I think that's a little bit of projection going on. Some of those people realize how irrational they are, and they think everybody's going to be that way. But let me give you kind of a little thought experiment here. Can you imagine, in whatever state you live, you get to be 16, 17 years old, and you get your driver's license. And you're going to go on a trip, and you're going to say, we're going to go on a trip. We're going to Washington. We're going to, I don't care what part of the country you live in. It's easier if you live on the East Coast because everything's more packed together. So it's like, I'm in North Carolina. I think I'm going to drive to South Carolina. Can you imagine your mom or your dad pulling you aside and say, now be careful because, you know, your North Virginia driver's license isn't good in South Carolina. You know, just what? You know, how does that make sense? Or could you imagine a case where, like, if you lived in a certain county of the state where you live, it would be really easy for you to get a driver's license, but you lived somewhere else in that state, maybe just a few minutes away in a different county, and it would be virtually impossible for you to get a driver's license. We'd say that'd be nuts. There's no sense to that. I mean, a car is a car is a car. People are kind of the same everywhere. So why would it make sense that in one state you could get a driver's license and that wouldn't be good everywhere else? As a matter of fact, it is good everywhere else. And state to state, there isn't much difference in the standards for getting a driver's license. And that makes sense. See, that's an application of rational principles of law. But it's completely different than that with concealed carry, which I think is strange because there's no right in the Constitution to drive an automobile. However, there is a right in the Constitution to keep and bear arms. So you think if it's that easy with automobiles, which, by the way, more people are killed in automobile accidents every year than by handguns. Think about that for a second. You know, why is it so difficult with handguns? Why can't we have that similar kind of about the same laws, about as easy to get a permit, and they're good everywhere? Well, a number of states have actually entered into reciprocity agreements. So if you get a permit in Utah, if you get a permit in Nevada, you get a permit in Florida, for instance, if you got a permit in those 3 states, you'd be good to go, something like 37, 38, it may even be up to 40 states right now that have reciprocity agreements that say, oh, you're going to let our people that have permits carry in your state, so we'll do the same for you. That kind of thing back and forth. And that makes sense too. There are holdouts. California, for instance, is a big holdout for that one. I can drive across state lines to Nevada and I can get myself a Nevada concealed carry permit easier than I can get one in the county where I live in California. And that permit in Nevada would be good at all kinds of different states throughout the nation, but not good in California. Funny that the state of Nevada, where I don't live, recognizes my rights more than the state where I live. It's insane, right? Similarly, if you're in California, and I'll use California as an example, but I have no reason to believe it's not similar some other places around the country. Some of you will have to chime in the video notes. The county where I live is actually, the process is pretty straightforward to get a concealed carry permit. It's not as easy as some other counties are, and it's not as bad as some others are. So for instance, up in Butte County, where a relative of mine lives, it's pretty straightforward. You fill out a form and you go, well, I'm not a nut, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a drug addict, and I want to carry a gun for self-defense. That's it. You're going to be approved. That's what we call shall issue, which means you're going to get a permit unless there's some good reason for you to not get one. Well, where I live, Placer, you got to have a little bit better reason. You got to kind of say, well, I'm a guy that does gun gear and knife reviews, and I'm usually traveling around with several $1000s worth of rifles and guns and ammunition and stuff like that, and I'm regularly doing handgun trainings, so I have an elevated threat profile or something. They kind of go, okay, Other places in California, San Francisco, which is both a city and a county, the city and county of San Francisco, it's pretty much, forget it. We're not giving them out. We're not even going to let you see the paperwork that says what our standards are. You're just wasting your time. Now, some people will say, well, that's important because, different counties have different ways of doing things and the population is set up demographically different. And what that's kind of saying is like, oh, people are different there. Really? Are they? I just don't see that working at all. And even if they are, there's something about it that doesn't make sense to me at all. I live in Granite Bay, California, which is in Placer County. I think that's the first time I've mentioned that, by the way, that I live in Granite Bay. That's about 20 minutes away from my job in Folsom, California, which incidentally is in another county. It's in El Dorado County. El Dorado County, it's pretty easy to get a concealed carry permit. Okay, not so easy in Placer. We've got some other counties around here that are close enough that it's much more difficult to get a concealed carry permit in. There's actually people that I work with where I go who commute from the Bay Area. They've got an arrangement where they have cheap airfare or something through the company like that. Some of them even commute from other states. Okay, so think about this situation. I could be sitting in a meeting with 10, 15 people, and the people that live right there in Folsom, it's pretty easy for them to get a concealed carry permit. The people that commuted from Sacramento, up until recently, it was pretty darn near impossible. And Sacramento's gotten a little bit better because we're fighting the good fight in California and making things happen. In Folsom, I'm coming in, I'm good, Somebody from Butte County, they're coming in. The people from San Francisco, they're not allowed, okay, to have a concealed carry permit because it's based upon where you live. So apparently some people's lives are more important than others. If you're in San Francisco, the government doesn't consider your life important enough for you to be able to save it. So here we are in Folsom, and some of us can have guns and some of us can't. Is there any sense to that? Because it's based only on where you live. Some people might actually, if you want to talk about needing a reason to have a handgun, some people might actually have more of a reason than others. But just based upon where they live, you can't have a permit. But it's sillier than that. I mean, you might think people in San Francisco would say, well, we want to have a gun-free city. We want it to be very, very safe. We want to have a safe town. We just don't want people running around with guns, okay? That was a liberal voice, by the way, not a gay voice. We have a group called the Pink Pistols that's a gay gun rights group, and they'll get all over me, so I just don't even want to go there. But, that's kind of the attitude. But now, wait a minute. San Francisco is a big tourist city, right? And there's people coming in from all over California that have gun permits and are perfectly within their rights to carry a weapon concealed when they go to San Francisco. So what you're really saying is the people that live in San Francisco, you're not allowed to have a gun, but people from outside San Francisco, you can bring one in. The city and county of Sacramento is limiting the rights of its own citizens to defend themselves while simultaneously acknowledging that they're unable to prevent people from other counties coming in with guns. Is this making your head spin? It certainly makes my head spin, and it makes a lot of people who live in California makes their heads spin as well. And I know there's similar situations around the country that are every bit as crazy. And it is crazy. It's stupid. It's beyond stupid. It makes no sense whatsoever. So what do we need to do? Well, regardless of what the laws are right now, we need to come to a situation in this country where most places are going to be what you call shall issue, which means if you're going to make people have a permit, they ought to be able to get the permit easily if they're a person of decent character and they don't have a criminal record, they're not used to drunken binges and getting violent in bars and stuff like that, they're not mentally ill or on some other, psychotropic medication or whatever, or there's not some other good reason to deny them a gun permit, they ought to get one, okay? It ought to be innocent until proven guilty. If you haven't shown that you're some kind of an idiot that shouldn't have a gun, then you get a permit, right? And if you're somewhere in the country where they're a little bit more sensible, you'll have constitutional carry, which means you don't need a permit at all. The Constitution is your permit. That's the more sensible one. But regardless of how it is in your country, the states ought to recognize each other's concealed carry permits in the same way that they recognize driver's licenses and marriages and contracts and almost every other piece of legal paperwork or identification that there is in the United States right now. That's the only way that makes any sense, and until we get to that point, we've got a situation that is just plain crazy, stupid, and completely disrespects everyone's lives and probably ends up costing people their lives in many cases. That's my little rant on stupid gun laws for the day. Zombie Tactics, preparing you for a world gone dead, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.